Hello, Chris. Great to have you back.
Thank you, Philip.
So, what is freedom for Schelling?
Now, this is a huge question, so I'm only going to give a very small answer because I want more people to, from this come and join the class so we can study it together. At one point in the freedom essay, Schelling says, and I quote, "But the real and vital concept is that freedom is the capacity for good and evil." So
Hmm.
freedom is uniquely tied to this moral question of good and evil. And there's a reason why. Um, for Schelling, there is um, freedom is uniquely bound to the individual will, right? He'll actually say that will is primal being. Um, and our decisions, our decisions in life, um, our free decisions in life, are grounded based on how we how we act in the world. And for
Hmm.
him, there are two paths, let's say. We talked about love and wrath in the last video or the last two videos. The first video we talked about love and wrath.
Hmm.
So if if our decisions and our will is being guided by what he calls the ego, egoity,
Okay.
desire,
Yeah.
that's not a free decision for him. That is,
No.
in a sense, moving towards evil. That's putting
Okay.
ourselves above everybody else.
Yeah.
So that is what he calls the will of the ground, which we'll get to. And I don't want to go in the weeds here. So freedom really is tied together with this moral question of good and evil.
Hmm.
What what is the motive behind our, or the intention, let's say, behind our willing of a specific action? But freedom also relates to this element of, when people think about that, when people think about God creating the world, right? We usually always have to say, no, 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 God had a necessity to create the world. Schelling will say, no, no, he didn't have a necessity. The minute that you add necessity to it, you've removed God's freedom. He has to do this. That's the point. He didn't
Hmm.
have to create the world, right? God is a living being in this point. And he actually states that. We're talking about a living God. So all of this idea of good and evil comes to the center because of the way that Schelling is forming personality, the individual. Now, this is what I want everyone to take from this course, that freedom, ground, and system are uniquely tied together.
Hmm.
He begins by talking about this ground of God or nature in God, and what what is left in this ground is darkness that has no reason, right? That's the key point. The
Okay.
ground without reason is this dark ground. This is the dark principle. The light principle becomes active in the ground when we have the element of reason or the word logos, right? We can
Okay.
think of this as the biblical word.
Yeah.
That, in a sense, is the element of good and evil in
Uh-huh.
freedom, knowing the logos or knowing the word, which means, and in a Kantian sense, not using an individual as a means to an end, but seeing individuals as ends in themselves. The kingdom of ends for Schelling is the universal will. We
Hmm.
recognize people as their own personality, as their own individuals. The minute that we start removing that barrier, we're no longer free because we are, in a sense, slaves to our ego. And he
Right.
literally states that there are two elements of personality, ipseity, which is individuality, and egoity, which is just blind cravings. And
Right.
now the question is, where does he get all of this? Well, He gets all of this from the beginning cosmology of the ground, right? Everything is a microcosm of this greater macrocosm of the cosmos.
Okay.
So the fact that we have these two principles, nature has the same two principles, God has the same principles, everything is kind of aligned. Now,
Uh-huh.
freedom, at the point where we're conscious and we're aware of reason and the logos, that is where we can, um, that is where we, in a sense, where our personality allows us to make free decisions, where free decisions are bound to our own being. Actually, Heidegger states very nicely that freedom for Schelling um, is a property of being. He says this very nicely in the
Okay.
lectures on the freedom essays. So if this sounds vague, I'm doing this on purpose because I want more people to be enticed by it. What do you mean? Leaving the seeds of questions there, but let's just say that Schelling gives a genealogy of the formation of personality,
Right.
but the beginning of personality starts off before the biblical beginning.
Mhm.
People before the biblical beginning, or the world before that. And the world before the biblical beginning, before the Logos, is a dark world, a chaotic world. For those of you interested in theosophy and Kabbalah, this is exactly that realm of desire and darkness that he'll then talk about later in the essay. But then the minute that we get reason, we become conscious and conscious of the word, we get light and dark. And in a
Mhm.
sense, there you go. There is that decision, right? And what is a decision for Schelling? It's a decision, a cut between two options. Loving, a loving decision, a wrathful decision, or a good decision, or an evil decision. So egoity, ipseity, individuality. Now, this is going to confuse everybody, but let's just say, for the benefit of the doubt, that 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 what idealism gave before was a very general concept of freedom.
Mhm.
What realism gave was a formal concept, as he says. But what he is trying to get at the very beginning of the freedom essay, he he states, look, what we're doing, what we're looking for is really the concealed essence of freedom. What is that? He says, now everyone has a conception of freedom. We do. We have a notion of freedom. However, we want to go beyond that notion. We want to get at the very heart of the essence of freedom. And the heart of the essence of freedom is tied up in this biblical story. It's tied up in this cosmological story and at the root and ground of personality. Now, at this point, he gets rid of subjectivity. He doesn't talk about subjectivity. He talks about the person because a
Mhm.
personality is this kind of organic understanding of an individual. An individual, a person, a personality can be multiple things at once. It can be angry, it can be
Yeah.
happy, it can be unsatisfied, it can be satisfied, maybe unsatisfied, like all of the people watching the video right now because they want to learn more about this. So he's looking for this essence of freedom, but in order to do this, he needs to go through this systematic understanding of how life emerges. And he gives us a kind of cosmological story, um, right? He gives us the roots of where humanity comes from, this ground.
Yeah.
And then he gives us the element of the laws or rules or reasons behind each individual and that what they follow. This would be the biblical element, the divine element. And then he goes a little further into what happens when beings are living together,
Yeah.
um, right? And we want things. And so he, in a sense, he he's trying to trace all of these steps. And so this is it's a big systematic work. And as the course is called, freedom, uh, freedom, system, and ground, or freedom, ground, and system. essentially philosophy and world are bound together, just like freedom and ground are bound together. So all of these concepts are bound together in his understanding of freedom. But let's just say, for the time being, that his concept of freedom, or the element of freedom that we're going to be investigating, is this capacity for good actions, good decisions, and evil decisions.
Yes, it's good that you circled back to that because I wanted to ask on that because it sounds to me that for Schelling, one can choose to or decide to do good or decide to do evil. So then the
Yes,
question is, why would anyone ever decide to do evil? Does it happen by accident? Is it because we don't, I mean, they're doing it in ignorance, or are they knowingly deciding to do evil?
it's really interesting. When when he starts talking about being, he says that a human being has its own center, its own centrum. He
Hmm.
uses the Latin. And the center is this kind of middle point of being, a ground of personality, let's say. Where evil comes up is desire, this longing. The term in German is Sehnsucht,
Hmm.
longing, languishing, maybe. Um,
Which is different from Begierde.
lo yeah, longing for more. The minute that we begin to long for more, or we desire more, more than our own means, is where that center of our being becomes uprooted. It
Hmm.
becomes it slowly disintegrates to the periphery, as he says. He gets this from Franz von Baader. And the minute that it separates and comes to the periphery, is when anything else can just shoot into the center of your being, which for him is desire. And this is why he calls it egoity, because the ego really is in full charge here. You become a part of this endless cycle of desiring. Now, for those of you that love Schopenhauer, yes, this is the text that influences Schopenhauer and Schopenhauer's cycle of the will.
Hmm.
So it's a key text for that as well. But this aligns us. We're literally unaligned, sorry. We become, we don't know. We are no longer ourselves. Um, to use Heideggerian terms, we're fallen in this
I
sense.
mean, it sounds very existentialist,
It is that
right?
this
It
is the,
sounds like something opens up, we fall out of alignment, there's this gap, desire comes in to sort of fix things maybe, but instead it gives us lots of anxiety. It's, and it's a puzzling to me why Schelling isn't included in a sort of prototypical early existentialists. Those
it's
weren't,
funny. It's
yeah,
funny you bring that up because the people that are reading this text at the time are all existentialists. Karl
yeah,
Jaspers,
yeah,
Heidegger,
yeah.
right? Tillich, um, even Parison, early Parison, are all very proto-existentialists. Maybe phenomenologists, maybe more theological existentialists, some of them later. But yet, no, very much an existential text. This is why um, I like to I like to think of this text as going kind of beyond idealism. He has a kind of odd ontology, right? This is what Heidegger finds so interesting about this text because there's a kind of ontology going on throughout it. Um, the later the later Heidegger, in his late 30s and early 40s, he becomes extremely interested in this freedom essay. So does
Yeah.
Karl Jaspers. Because of this, as you state so nicely, existentialist element there. There really is something about decision. Schelling plays on the German word Entscheidung. Now, Entscheidung for him is decision, but if you just say Scheidung, that means scission, cut, a split, a divorce, let's say. So he really wants to show you the fundamental choices behind, or the fundamental split, the fundamental dualism there in your decision. Are you choosing? Are you really free in this moment by just accepting what your urges and longing and desire want? Or are you really center? Are you whole, deciding on these questions or deciding on these options?
Yes. So this brings to mind a second, a different kind of question, and that um, is this frame or idea of freedom applicable to all kinds of situations or only the most important ones? Right? Should I be thinking about shelling when I'm picking cereal in the grocery store? Or should I be thinking more or about shelling when I am in love with a person or embarking on a big project that might consume me for the next 10 years, right? Where or is it applicable to both or one more than the other? Where do we sort of draw the line here, if one should be drawn?
Well, so even Schellingians are, when we talk about this, I mean, I'm in love with this work, but even Schellingians will say that at the end of the text, the you know the literature is confused at the end because later he'll say that evil decisions are non-being. You become almost an element of non-being. You become this like nothing.
Hmm.
So about your question about the cereal, here's the thing. Do you want the sugar in the cereal or do you want the cereal because it's there to quench your hunger, it's there to end your breakfast.
Hmm.
So no, I think the question of freedom here is a living freedom that's meant, well, are you buying the cereal that's good for your body, that's good for you practically, or are you getting the fruit sugary cereal that's not good that it's your kind of weakness, then that's not free. You're not, that's not an element of freedom. You're not freely choosing that. You're in a sense desiring that sugar or desiring that. So there's a practical element to this as well too. He'll
Right.
even he'll even say with love, you cannot just desire the other. You cannot, love is not the desiring of the other. The two have to come together freely and willingly in the sense of they they come together in true love, which is not just I desire the other or the other desires me. It's a love that is that they wouldn't need each other if okay, let me say this again. It's a love that is not tied to any kind of, filling in the gap of something. I need a relationship in my life, therefore I have a girlfriend. No, it's nothing
Right.
like that.
Yeah.
It's the two kind of come together as a real whole, right? So for him, freedom really and individuality, ipseity, the individual free person who's aligned in their will and there's the center of their being really has to be centered completely and wholly.
Hmm.
But he'll say that this is a struggle. This is why he loves contradiction, right?
Yeah.
Without contradiction, there is no life, he states in this essay,
Right.
which means you're going to always fall back into that evil urge, not evil, but desiring element in you. You're always going to fall back into that. Every day, it's a new struggle. Every day is a
Yeah.
new struggle. Every day, you're a new self, you know, in this battle.
Yeah, so what you just said gave me the idea or the impression that maybe what freedom and deciding the good in shelling might be is that, well, you are capable, have capacity, a potency to create a whole new situation and make things happen in that situation where whatever you did previously could not predict or sort of be the condition of. You from yourself, from your capacities, you spawn this arrangement or activity, and that becomes its own sort of being,
Yep.
right? And
Yep. I
it's
think you
not
said that perfectly.
because of a lack or a gap or anything like that. You just had this genius or inspiration where you just made something happen. A new world opened up, and you stepped into it. That's the kind maybe is that kind of could
Yeah.
that be freedom?
Yeah. No, that's also what he would call creativity. There's that element of creativity there, which you brought up very nicely as well, too. So yeah, no, I think you got that perfectly.
Whereas the
Yeah.
evil then would be what depends on something and maybe even detracts from it, weakens it, relies
Right.
on it, right?
Yes. Yeah.
As we find in the Bible, Jesus asked, "Well, how do you distinguish a true prophet from a false one? By the fruits of their works, you will know them, right?"
Yeah.
So, what are the fruits of your actions, right? What does it lead to, right? Is it sucking out the life of others, or is it bringing life to them, right?
Yeah. It's funny. It's funny. There's a part in the end of the treatise where Schelling says that um oh my gosh, Judas is not a sinner because he gave the location of where Jesus was for 30, shekels, but because he chose freely to give his friend, right, Christ, away, knowing what would happen to him going
Hmm.
before the authorities. And that choice, right, fractured Judas's own center. He chose that personally. He chose that. And that at that moment, that's what Schelling calls sin, right? Where he's not going with a universal will, with what is best here in this option, but what he wanted, and he
Mm,
chose that freely. So that's what makes him a sinner in that
right.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you seen the movie Memento?
I love Memento. Yeah.
This reminds me of a scene towards the end of the movie, which by the chronology of the film, I think happens in the
Yeah.
middle of the story, which is kind of like a very key point, key shift, where he decides to do evil knowingly, right? He decides to do something terrible and bad and know that, he will not remember it because of his condition. So he kind of is tricking himself into this wretched path. But there you have that situation.
Yep. That would be 100% evil for
Yeah.
Schelling. Non-being, actually. It would be
Mm,
complete non-being. He's no longer his center, his centrum, his center. The center of his being is completely uprooted,
yeah.
gone. Yeah.
So then why does one do such things? Like what is the motivation?
And this is a good question. And this is why, okay, so I will just bring this up because maybe the students can come back to this when we start talking about ground, but this is important. When Schelling begins talking about the creation of the cosmos, he uses two mythical examples. Now, I bring up mythical not to devalue the biblical understanding or anything. I'm just saying. So he basically starts off by saying that God and the Kabbalah essence element contracts inward and creates what he calls a receptacle, just like in the Timaeus.
Hmm.
So we're in this receptacle, this ground in God, which he calls nature. Now, in order for true freedom, right, this ground in God is individual and separate, but still in God. Okay, this is the
Okay.
hardest part to understand about the freedom essay. It's
Right.
co-eternal with God,
Uh-huh.
but it's also separate, which would be called in the biblical terms the fall.
Yeah.
So this separation, this independence, right,
Hmm.
allows for true freedom, according to Schelling. It needs to happen. We're in this ground in God. Now, what happens is that God does not want to to put his true essence in all of that at this time, because this is where creation is going to happen. But at that point, this ground is, in a sense, yearning to come back to God. It has all it has is desire. It
Okay.
desires to be something. It craves to be something more than itself. And that's the beginning root of evil.
All right. Yeah.
It's that craving, that desire without reason, without the biblical word, without the logos.
Hmm.
So let me just see if I can, let me just, he says this really nicely. He says, after the eternal act of self-revelation, after the creation of the ground, everything in the world as we see it now, rule, order, and form. So everything in the world is rule, order, and form. But anarchy still lies in the ground. The German word he uses there um, is regelos, unruly.
Hmm.
So there's this unruliness in the ground. Okay? He says, anarchy still lies in the ground, as if it could break through once again, and nowhere does it appear as if order and form were what is original, but rather as if an initial anarchy had been brought to order. This is the incomprehensible basis of reality in things, the indivisible remainder. The remainder here is that yearning, that desire, that endless darkness.
Hmm.
That which is with the greatest exertion cannot be resolved in the understanding, but remains eternally in the ground. So before reason, there is an unreason that is in this ground before reason, right? So,
Right.
and that is the root of evil. I didn't want to go through this, but I think maybe it's important that we have this video out so if anybody gets confused, they can go back to this.
Yeah.
So essentially, that the origin of this endless root of desire, even in Plato, Plato talks about this too with the rings of Gyges. It's already there in our nature because we're born in this ground. And what gives us the element of personality? What gives us maybe the light here, or what allows for the light to transfigure the darkness is the right. Schelling's a Christian, is the biblical text. It's the biblical notion, the logos.
Hmm.
It's knowing reason. It's knowing what is good and what is evil
Yeah.
according to this text. But that text only emerges in a specific time. What about the time prior? And
Yeah.
that's what his point is. So he's being very succinct about the historical line here. We have this
Yeah.
ground without reason. It's the unreason at this moment. It doesn't have an understanding. It doesn't have a self-reflecting consciousness to know what it's doing, to know itself, to know its personality. And this is very key. So you
Hmm.
can see that the origins of humanity are grounded in this endless root of desire, this unruly anarchy that lies in nature, that
Yeah.
lies in the ground. That is, by the way, one of the principles in us. Since we're born in that ground,
Right.
that also comes into our own being. Sorry for going a little too
It,
metaphysical there, but
well, it actually, in a way, it's kind of like proto-Freudian with the unconscious, right? With the id that just wants and
and
other
actually
philosophers. I'm
they
sorry?
say that there is this argument that Schelling actually created the unconsciousness.
Right. Yeah.
Unbewusstlos, is that how you say it in German? Or yeah, no,
Unbewusst.
bewusstlos, sorry.
Yeah.
So and Schelling really means that. There is this, even in the ages of the world, the
Yeah.
past is this unconscious past because it's not cognized. So in this sense, the light is not cognized, the light is not understood. Reason is in its unreasonable state. It's in the unreason, he says, which is an odd word for him to use, but he says, like, what comes before reason? Unreason. It has to
Right.
be. Like,
Right.
what comes before this moment? And the weird thing is when we get this biblical word, it's really historically weird. Like, if you think about the Greek world, now I've been thinking about this for a while, but think about the Greek world for a second. I'm not saying that Plato didn't have a concept of freedom, but just think about this for 1 second. In the Greek and Roman world, They had fate and destiny, right? You're chained to your fate, and you're chained to this wheel of destiny and of fate. And then all of a sudden we get, who do we get? We get Augustine. And then all of a sudden the freedom of the will comes alive. Now, I'm not saying that there's this split between the worlds. What I'm saying is it's this weird gap between them where
Mhm.
now there's a free will and a free being, and one that is now actively, in their world, choosing in their world, while one has fate and destiny and determined. But where did this happen? Where did this emergence of the word come from? Where did the emergence of this mythical Christian, Judeo-Christian story come from? And
Mhm.
so Schelling is playing with that tension,
Yeah.
right? By the way, just for the viewers, I'm not saying that the Greek world they didn't have freedom. I'm just saying they didn't have a self-reflected or self-conscious understanding of freedom for Schelling
Well,
in this sense.
one can debate this, but it does seem like freedom maybe wasn't as ult like of ultimate concern for the Greek world as it is for the modern world,
Yeah,
where individuality and universality come into more focus, right? I think you're right that fate and destiny seemed more of the fabric of those worlds, even though with the thinkers that fabric is starting to get broken apart.
right.
Right. But they don't quite pierce through it until we get to Christianity and Augustine and that because that's there I think you have this idea of universality and equality, right? Everybody's souls, everybody's equal in front of God, emperor
Yes.
or beggar, right? Whereas in the pagan world, there really was, a hierarchy of souls. Like the emperor's
Absolutely.
genius was a bigger soul than, the slave in working in the mines.
Yeah, and this is what he's trying to map out with this freedom essay. Really, the concealed essence of freedom, the genealogy of freedom. Where does it come from? And really, why he uses this mytho poetic element is because, you know, that moment in time, historical time, we don't have it cognized, but we
No,
do have it cognized in mythology. We do have
right.
it under, right? It's there in the mythology or in the biblical texts. And so here we do. Here we have this element, this systematic text where we have this moment where it happens. So
Right.
he uses that very, very keenly in order to say, not to say that one world is better than the other, but one world was in a sense, according to him, in darkness consciously, right?
Mhm.
As opposed to being conscious of what they're doing, I guess we could say.
And the fact that it occurs first in mythology and in narratives and maybe even in poetry, right? Or mystical statements suggests that it's still an unreason. It's
Yep,
less an unreason than before. It's kind of coming up, but it's not really coming up as reason yet. It's coming up in
perfect.
these representational figurative forms. One might say it comes first through inspiration.
Yep.
And why does that happen? Well, because reason is impatient. Wants to give you the payload as soon as possible because you need it, man, right?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sorry, I wish I could just dump the science of logic at you 3,000 years ago, but no, we need this the development
Yeah,
to
no,
get
true.
there, and and you need it quickly, right? This stuff is important. You need the logos in any way, shape, or form you can because your
Yeah.
life depends on it.
Actually, Hegel's philosophy of history has it states it really nicely. This is why the Greeks are so in love with the sensuousness, even their art, right? Like they
Right.
have this sensuous world. They captivate it. It's been a long time since I've read this text. Unfortunately, maybe I should reread it. But right, there is a procession to his, or there is an unfolding for history for him, right? There's the Greek world. Oh, well, there's China, India, and then of course Europe. But there is this moment of where the Greeks are so infatuated with sensuousness rather than consciousness or understanding, which sounds bad,
Yes,
but
they marry form and content perfectly. That
yes.
is visible
Yep.
through their architecture, sculpture, and dramas and so on, right? Yeah. And that all goes away with the Roman world.
True. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for this, Chris. This was really good, and
Thank
it
you.
goes
Thank
to
you for
show
having
that
me.
it's just so much to think about, and so much pertinent things in Schelling, right?
Yeah,
Evil is a concern very much with us today, and one we
very
should
much.
take into more profound consideration. And Schelling can be the one to help us do that, right?
Yeah. Let's hope so.
Well, even if not, that is also fruitful, right?
True. It really is. It
Yeah.
is. Yes.
As long as you're on the pursuit, that's what's important. Right. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Philip.